Hi. Good morning, good evening, and good day for folks who are joining us from different parts of the world. I see some of you are not in India, and welcome to session 5. Today we're going to look at EC2's AMI, right? And we're going to see what AMIs are, where we are going to find them within the AWS Web Console, and some vulnerabilities that occur because of how you've configured and set up your AMIs, right? For folks who are joining us for the first time and who have not attended any of my sessions, my name is Riaz Walekar. I'm a co-founder and the chief hacker at Kloudle. We're building Kloudle as a product for SaaS engineers, SREs, infra teams. Right? It's not a security. It's not built technically for security folks, but folks who are DevOps who are managing the cloud, right? And to automate the detection of assets, misconfigurations, and provide remediation as well, automated remediation in some cases, to save time so that they can go and build their actual product that they have been working for. Okay, so essentially increase their productivity. I've got over a decade and a half worth of experience in breaking web apps, mobile apps, and cloud infra in general. I've worked with some of you. I have trained some of you in the trainings that I do at conferences. I see familiar names in the audience, right? That's my Twitter, and that's the company Twitter, where we do a lot of we share a lot of content. We run an active technical academy as well, so in case you want to read more technical stuff about the cloud or containers and Kubernetes in general, we've got one running at kloudle.com/academy. I think I'll just update the page when I'm distributing the slides to you. I'm required to share this by the compliance team. Got it copied somewhere. Folks who are joining us for the first time, make sure that you definitely do read the code of conduct. Folks who've been attending since day one, you've seen this multiple times, but make sure that you go through it again. All right, what we're going to do in today's agenda is we're going to look at what AMIs are. Essentially two, I wouldn't say features or services, but the way AMIs is set up in the AWS Web Console for you to interact with AMIs that you create as well as what other accounts create. We're going to look at the AMI catalog, right? It's a much more fancier UI for searching through AMIs that AWS Marketplace has, what AWS has created, as well as what community folks have created. And essentially, we're going to look at AMIs as to what they are, why they are, and how you can use and reuse somebody else's AMIs. Setting up the lab for this session, there's technically no lab as such because I've created the lab. You're going to work with the commands and do some interesting discovery and things like that. And we're going to look at two AMI misconfigurations. We're going to look at AMIs that are made public, where you as the owner of the AMI accidentally makes them public, and backdoor AMIs, where people, malicious folks, have created AMIs and you end up using some of those. What are AMIs? AWS AMIs are, if you imagine it, or the way I visualize things, if you think of your laptop, AMIs are the entire system, right? Last week we saw EBS, which was just the disk, right? Your hard disk or SSDs, if you may. But AMIs are the entire system itself. So you get your CPU, you get your RAM, you get your whatever boot architecture it has, the EBS as well, any snapshots that were created for the EC2. So when you create an EC2 instance and you take a snapshot of the entire system. Right. So essentially, imagine if one of you wanted help setting up, say, a Kubernetes master node, and just say I'm proficient with creating Kubernetes clusters. I create a Kubernetes master node on an EC2 standalone cluster, not AS, and I make an AMI out of the EC2 instance, and then I distribute it to all of you folks so that you can recreate an EC2 instance out of the AMI that I've created for you. When you launch an instance, you must specify an AMI, right? All the times that we've been launching instances within AWS, there is a section where you select the operating system, right? It basically comes from an AMI that has been created. You don't boot from start. There's no ISO that you're booting from and then reinstalling the OS. It's already been pre-created as part of the AWS infra. And interestingly, AMIs are region specific. So if you create an AMI in US East 1 and if you want to copy it to say Canada or Singapore, you would have to move the AMI, right? Essentially, there's a copy operation within the AMI interface which allows you to move between regions, copy between regions. You create an AMI from an EC2 instance and EC2 instances from AMIs, so they're both very heavily dependent on each other. AMI permissions can be updated to public so that all AWS users can access them. Right? There's also normally a permission for you to allow it to be accessible only to a particular account or an organization, right? But we will see how folks have AMIs listed publicly so that the whole world can access as long as you have an AWS account. Okay, let's and the bit that is that you need to remember is that when you're creating an EC2 instance out of an AMI, make sure that you trust the vendor who's created the right, so that you don't end up using a backdoored AMI. Essentially, when you reuse something that say I'm trustworthy enough, but imagine if I was a bad guy and I had created an AMI and with some catchy name, so that if you are setting up say a specific kind of software and searching that for in the AMI interface, you would end up on my AMI, right? And that would give you a backdoored instance. When you set up an EC2 instance, I would probably have access. All right. Make sure, can everyone confirm that you have profile masterclass set up? This was created in session 1. All of you who are joining us for the first time today also have received the instructions on setting this up. Excellent. All right, we're going to look at two things. We're going to explore the AMI catalog at the URL that's there. Right? So copy pasting, I'll show you how to get there. And we are going to create an EC2 instance and do some exercises with an AMI that's public. Okay. So for now, can all of you log into your AWS console and head to the EC2 section. Pull that up. So if you go to AMI catalog on the left here, this is a collection, and this is again region specific, right? So this is in US East 1. This is a region specific thing which shows AMIs in the marketplace, AWS marketplace, as well as community AMIs. Right? There are about 500 of them. The most frequently used 500 community AMIs. This is not all the community AMIs, right? Community AMIs are anybody who's created, you and me types who've created. So published by anyone, but it shows only 500, which is a bizarre thing because definitely there are far more AMIs in US East 1. We're going to take a look at that in a bit. And the marketplace AMIs. So if you're essentially searching for, say, we'll go to Quick Start AMIs, and if you want all Linux, Unix, right, and 64-bit, these are the AMIs that you've been using to even set up your EC2 instances. When you go create EC2 instance, one of the machines that you will select is from here. Okay. All right. As exercise for you folks, can you find the Masterclass AMI from last session under Community AMIs? Can you find the Masterclass AMI that we created in last session? And the second thing for you folks to do is, using the command line, find all AMIs belonging to the account, that particular account. I'm going to paste that account ID in chat here. So the first one is straightforward. You have to go to Community AMIs and just search for Masterclass. That should get it. Oh, there it is. Were you able to find it? Right, so you can then select this and launch an instance. Don't do this. You've already done this before, but this is how you would go about searching in the Community AMI section in the AMI catalog. Right. Again, as I said, these are not all the AMIs that are meant to be public. So the second one, using the command line, find all AMIs belonging to the account number that's already given to you. we will work with a command which is EC2 describe images. All right. Let me just open up prompt here. Okay. Is owners profile us. You see that? Okay, so this gives you like a list of all AMIs created by this particular account. Right? I don't know who the account is, but because it's not possible in AWS, it would be a big security issue. If given an account number, you can identify who the account owner is. Some organizations, they publicize their account ID, like Microsoft, for example, or Red Hat. You know what their account ID is, but identifying the organization is not allowed, right, in AWS. Okay, so you have a bunch of AMIs. This is too much information if you're trying to consume it at the first go. So what we'll do is we'll apply some filters to this, and what we're going to do is, and this you'll keep using this query argument within the AWS CLI. Essentially, I will query for, and this is JSON, right? So all images, identify their image ID, name, and platform details. I'm lazy, so I'll just copy this. I'm going to give this two commands to you also in chat. Here you go. Okay, so turns out that this particular owner, the account ID, has 4 AMIs that are listed publicly. How do we know this is public? Is because you are not that account, right? And when you're specifying a profile masterclass, because you get results, these are the AMIs that are public. This is a good time to go take a look at the AMI dashboard. And how do you do that is you go to AMIs. You remember in when we did this session last week for EBS, we looked at EBS block storage that we've created as well as block storage that's publicly available, right? Similarly, for AMIs, I have one AMI that's created here because it says owned by me. You can switch this to public images. How many do you think are public images? And again, like EBS, not all of them are accidental. Some of them are deliberately placed here so that people can reuse, right? Like Red Hat, CentOS, Ubuntu folks, for example, they create AMIs so that AWS users can use them. But there are definitely some AMIs here that have been accidentally made public. Okay, what do you think the approximate number is? There are 76,201 apparently here. It goes all the way to 1,500 pages. Not all of them are deliberately set up. Okay, so if you remember, when we're trying to, sorry about that, when you're trying to when you're trying to create an EC2 instance, you definitely need an AMI, right? If you imagine if you're going to be setting up an Ubuntu 2004, you would want that AMI to come from canonical folks, the people who make and manage Ubuntu. You would want the AMI to come from a trustworthy source. But there are definitely a lot of AMIs here that are accidentally placed, right? Maybe because they were trying to share the AMI within their teams and they essentially opened the AMI to the public. Okay, there are a bunch of them. Again, as a research project, it makes sense to automate creation and then inspection of the disks itself, like how we did with the EBS bit last week. But let me show you where the permissions bit is. If I select the AMI, when you've created it, right? How do you create an AMI? You create it from an EC2 instance, right? So imagine this, there is at some point in time, because you cannot create an AMI from arbitrary things, you require an EC2 instance, right? And then EC2, there's a new service there's another service in AWS called EC2 Builder that allows you to work with like this and add software to it and stuff. But at some point in time, AWS had no AMIs, right? So the first machine was created and then an AMI was created out of it, right? So right at the beginning of called the big bang of AMIs. You have a permissions tab here. So I've selected the AMI, and if you notice, if I go to edit AMI permissions, it's public right now, right? Which is why you can see it when you search. But the default permission is private, and you can use it to search, add permissions for specific account IDs, right? In large organizations where you have like say 30-40 AWS accounts, it may get cumbersome, because in the future there might be another AWS account that somebody has to go add here, right? And this is another management headache. Or you can add to the organization. This is the easiest, because any account that you create within an organization, standard good practice would be to have that account also under an AWS org, right? But not everybody adds accounts to AWS org. You have rogue accounts. I call them rogue accounts because they're not under an organization. It's difficult to manage and track them. You have those accounts independent of the AWS organization, and then you can add an org here so that the AMI is shared with the entire org and not to the whole world out there, right? But for our sake, we have this public so that you folks can find the AMI. Alright, let's look at the second one. This is where it gets a little interesting. This is the screenshot of an AMI catalog page. Okay, your question 2 is find an AMI called session5-warfare. Okay, then identify the users. You have to create an EC2 instance out of the AMI, and there's a sensitive file that you have to find and read the file. What I haven't told you folks is which region the AMI is present. So you have to first identify what region it is. I've used ChatGPT to create a script quickly. We can do that in parallel. But I want you folks to take a dig at this. Basically, find the AMI called session5-warfare using the AMI catalog, or essentially using the command line, and then identify the users on the EC2 instance, right? But first, let's go ahead and find the AMI. And again, as I said, you don't assume it's in US East 1. It is definitely not. It is in some other region. How do you approach this? Because we all know there is a -- region that you can add to your AWS CLI commands, right? So this searches in this particular region. Similarly, you need to search for the AMI in all regions. I'm assuming some of you use ChatGPT for work to speed up your work. I'll give you the command. Think about how you're going to implement this across all regions. I'll give you a minute. The command is in chat. How many of you do use ChatGPT or any other AI, Bard, Bing? Cool. Can you give me a bash script to run the following command across all AWS regions? Excellent. It is scary as well as extremely powerful. I'll copy this and back to our, I'll call it you spend more time thinking of the file name than ChatGPT produce the output, damn it. So AWS AMI hunter.sh. Okay. Very paranoid about naming conventions. Not superstitious, but paranoid. I have, what does the script do? It says profile masterclass, great. It's created a variable out of it. Now AWS EC2 describe regions is a command under EC2 that lists all the regions that are present in AWS that are active for you, right? Because there are some regions that you need to activate, like the Middle East, for example. The regions that you have to go separately and configure them to be active. Loop through each of these regions and run this command. All right. Anybody who's run this, they know where the AMI is. Chmod plus X. Anybody's got the output? Yeah, I'm not running this till one of you tells me. Okay, some of you may not have, I realize, ChatGPT accounts. I'm pasting the script here. Put this in a .sh, but the extension doesn't matter if you're passing it to bash. It could be a text for all you care. But bash run the script and it should iterate through based on the code that we've seen. Iterate through each of the regions and tell you which region the instance is, the images. Anyone, any luck? May take some time. I have to wait for this output because I don't remember what region I put this in. So it was, yeah, there you go. So turns out we can kill the script. Don't need the rest. This is in EU Central 1, right? So let's go to EU Central 1 and complete the rest of the exercise. The second bit is to identify the users on the EC2 instance that you will create out of this AMI. So let's head to EU Central 1. Switch regions here. Oh, Frankfurt, yes. There it is. Can you, I mean, this is visible to me because it's an image that I own. You will have to search for it here, right? Either here or in the AMI catalog within the Frankfurt region, the EU Central 1 region. All right, it's visible to me obviously because I own it, but you will have to switch to public images. It'll take some time to load, the first time load, or under AMI catalog, search for session 5-warfare. Okay. You should be able to find it. How do you create an EC2 instance now once the AMI has been discovered? Right click, launch instance. Okay, can you do this? I already have the instance running. We'll just assist. What then? See where my do you see the AMI name for the machine that I created for this exercise is Ubuntu Focal 2004. You actually get the AMI ID from where it was created. For now, let's pick the IP address that I need. -i where I've added user would be a Ubuntu at IP address. Can you folks also make sure, or let me know if you're stuck somewhere. If you've never created, let me just show you how this is done. Launch an instance from an AMI, give it a name, call it like 5 EC2. Oh, enough. Okay. This is a very intense and morbid self-realization. I actually spend a lot more time in naming things than actually running the commands. Okay, so I have I don't need this. It's been created from particular AMI. Some of you will require, actually if you don't have any keys created within this region, Frankfurt, for this group of people, we've not done anything in Frankfurt yet, but you essentially create a new key pair, right? And the commands to do this are also present here. You can name the key pair, call it again session 5 VM EC2. 825519 is a more preferred, smaller key, stronger key than RSA. So we use that. And in PEM format, unless some of you are using Windows and you need to use PuTTY, so PPK would work for that. Otherwise, OpenSSH and PEM. You create key pair, which I will save to the temporary folder somewhere I create this. There you go. So once you've done that, once the key is created, it comes up here. Just make sure that you are able to SSH. For now, because we have the PEM file and it's private key based login, there's no password for SSH to crack and stuff. You can allow SSH traffic from anywhere. If you're more paranoid and the better security, obviously recommendation is to have your IP. Okay, this is my IP address, so you can try and click on the drop down. It will auto detect your IP address. select that, and then launch instance. Right? That's it. Once you've launched instance, you have to, the only thing you need to do is change the permission on the file if it's not already done. That is a chmod 400 test key and then SSH. All right. Can you folks confirm? Some of you confirm that you've got to here. This is the fastest thing ever, creating an EC2 instance from an AMI. Takes away a lot of yeah, thank you. It takes away a lot of work from identifying how much RAM, how much CPU, and things like that. If somebody's pre-created an AMI, consider like a golden image, right, within an organization. You can use that and replicate it across multiple accounts, multiple users, for example. Okay, some of you, many of you have managed to create. Let me then take a look at what you need to do now. The task is, again, we're now moving from the actual AMI bit to working with an EC2 instance. This is generally so that you understand that publicly available AMIs can have data, right? Imagine from the 76,000 odd AMI images in US East 1, Frankfurt itself had a bunch more, which let's just take a look at how many Frankfurt has. AMIs, public images, 63,000, right? So there are 63,000 images in Frankfurt, right? And across all regions there are, I'm sure there are definitely about 1.5 lakh. Bunch of these AMIs, again, as I've been saying, may not have been created as part of deliberation, right? DevOps teams would have not created this deliberately, but accidentally, because they wanted to share it with their teams internally, and they've made it public because then they've forgotten to make it private. I've seen real world examples of this while working with customers. When you create an EC2 instance from the AMI, you now have access to the entire disk, right? Just like EBS, you have access to the entire disk. In EBS, when you create a volume out of a snapshot, you have to attach it to an existing EC2 instance so that you can then look at the file system. Here you have SSH access to an EC2 instance that you've created out of a public AMI, right? That's the big difference here. You can then identify the users. How do you identify users on the EC2 instance? That's the shell script that's there as part of the slides. You'll get this. So basically you can list, run the ls command on home. Okay, there are a bunch of users here: Bob, Jack, David, Kali. I don't know any of them, but one of them has some sensitive material that you need to find. Or the alternate is, you can, because you can do etc past WD is world readable. You have users here as well, and if you notice, now 1000 is the user that was first created, right, as part of operating system initialization. All these users 01, 2, 07 are created by by the user who is to manage the system. And interestingly, let me see if I can have access to the user script. Not here. Okay, I'll leave this as an exercise for our EC2 session when we do. When I set up this EC2 instance, I used a startup script to create all these users. Right? I didn't manually create these users. I wrote a small shell script, added it to the user data section when starting the EC2 instance, and that script during boot created all these users. Right? So I was trying to see if we can identify where the script is within the EC2, and I realized we have an entire session planned for EC2 instance session 7, I think, about 2 weeks from now, which is where we'll do a lot more of EC2 related stuff, including the instance metadata and bits those. So for now, coming back to our exercise that we have for today, there's a sensitive file that can be found in one of the user directory. How do you find this? Right? And obviously there are faster ways, and there are hard ways, and there are smarter ways, right? So if you know that the file is present in one of these users, you can either do find, but you don't know what the name of the file is. So let's do a tree. Take time. Tree is literally gives you a tree structure of the folder. I'm in the wrong. Okay, that was quick and dirty. So Grace seems to have some credentials. Yeah, that's also a good answer, Rajat. We can find our grep, but we don't know what the keyword is. I mean, here in this case, I called it credentials. Find and grep would definitely work with credentials. But think of like an arbitrary name, like config, or config also is like a common name. Think of an arbitrary name. I can't think of any now, but think of an arbitrary name that has credentials in it. And how do you find those credentials, right? Or that sensitive information. So Grace has some file. Let us switch to Grace's directory. Cat. This is obfuscated, so I will leave the exercise of deobfuscation to you folks. I've given the the command on how to deobfuscate it. If you just as a pro tip, now digressing from the actual content here, if you look at the string, it has a equal to at the beginning, right? 1 or 2 equal to's are padding characters for base 64. So you can think of this as a base 64, but for that the padding character has to be the end. So this becomes a reversed base 64. So if you do cat credentials and then reverse this, and then type this to base 64 decode, this will give you the answer. Anybody's got it? Yeah. Any one of you who plays CTFs and stuff like that, things like these will keep coming up, right? So very shabby way of obfuscating. But there is a local host, and there's a user, and there's a ninja level password. It's not very strong when your obfuscation is based on a publicly known reversing algorithm. Good. We've come to the end of the exercises. To undo the AWS changes, you've created an EC2 instance, so make sure you go delete that and take a look at any snapshots that have been created. Make sure you know the region. You were in Frankfurt. Make sure that you remove it from there. AWS also has extensive documentation on, there's a whole user guide on AMIs. Types of AMIs, you can buy and share AMIs as well, and sell AMIs as well to other companies. If you create thing with, like, say somebody needs an open source, ELK is a bad example. Like let's say they wanted something at Fluentd and Kibana and something like that. You could set up an AMI and then brand it with your organization's ID, and then sell it off to other people, right? A really nice documentation. I recommend folks to read this. Okay, this is a short feedback. Some of you don't fill the feedback, which is really sad. Please spend 2 minutes to ensure that you complete the feedback That's all for today. Let me just stop the recording. That's all for today, folks. If you have any questions, we can take them now. We have an ongoing free trial for Kloudle. So you can sign up for the free trial here, onboard your AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, GKE, Kubernetes, as well as DigitalOcean clouds. If you don't want to provide your own credentials, we have sandbox variants for all of these, so you can definitely try out the product with the sandbox. But I recommend onboarding 1 or 2 clouds and see for yourself kind of misconfigurations and the assets that we do. And there's also the academy, which I mentioned at the beginning, where we have a lot of technical articles being written. And if you want to see something specific, do let us know. That's our Twitter, Kloudle, and mine. And you can definitely reach me at my email address here. Thank you so much for your time, folks. And I hope to see all of you again next Saturday, and obviously subsequent classes as well. Have a safe weekend, folks. Bye-bye.